When I stood there, watching my own sister block me from entering the hotel, I felt the weight of every cold word she ever said settle on my chest. That was the moment everything changed. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not by Isabella's standards. Not by the standards of the family I was born into. But there I was outside, the Royal Crest Hotel, the grand, shimmering crown jewel of our father's empire, staring up at the very place that had become the symbol of everything I was told I would never be. The night was chilly, the kind of crisp air that makes your breath puff out in quick white clouds. The scent of fresh rain on pavement mixed with the faint aroma of expensive flowers from the hotel's grand entrance. Soft murmurs floated through the open doors, laughter, glasses clinking, the distant hum of a live piano. A celebration in full swing inside. Arthur's birthday. Our father, the man who built this empire, yet never seemed to build bridges with me. Isabella stood firmly in front of me, her posture rigid, eyes cold and unyielding. She wore the perfect shade of disdain like a tailored dress. Her voice was steady, sharp like the cut of her words. You don't belong here, Charlotte. You never did. I swallowed hard, tasting the bitterness of her judgment. Years of condescension echoed behind that simple sentence. Years of being dismissed because I left the family accounting firm the safe path to chase my own dreams. Dreams they said were foolish, reckless. I'm here for Dad's birthday, I said, voice calm but firm. I'm his daughter. She smirked, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Being his daughter doesn't mean you get a seat at this table. You're too unsuccessful, too poor to step inside. The word poor landed like a slap. Not because of money. Money had never been my problem. But because it was a symbol of how little they truly saw me. I looked past her, glimpsing the familiar faces of our family mingling inside, their laughter and easy conversations making a sharp contrast with the cold barrier between me and them. I glanced down at my coat, a modest but elegant piece, enough to hold its own against the upscale crowd. My hands, steady now, didn't tremble as I reached into my pocket. The moment had come. I was tired of hiding, tired of being the family's forgotten daughter. Isabella, I began, voice steady. You might want to step aside. She raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement playing across her features. Or what? I pulled out my phone, tapped a few times, and handed it to one of the nearby staff who had just approached to intervene. A silent buzz ran through the hotel's lobby as the staff member's eyes widened, then bowed respectfully toward me. The entire room shifted. Conversations paused. All eyes turned toward me. I stepped inside. Not just as Charlotte, the dismissed daughter, but as Charlotte, the billionaire founder and CEO of the Royal Crest hotel chain. For years, I left the family firm, tired of the petty comparisons and the cold shoulders. I had a secret, a life they never knew one I built from nothing, while they scoffed. I created an empire that now bore the same name they celebrated tonight. The shock on their faces was a quiet kind of thunder. Isabella's lips pressed into a thin line. Dad's eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise before settling into something more complex pride or regret. I couldn't tell. The guests whispered among themselves, their tones shifting from polite curiosity to outright astonishment. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of a grand clock hanging in the lobby, the kind of silence that stretches, filling the room with anticipation. And there I stood, finally seen not as the failure or the poor sister, but as the woman who had earned every inch of respect they'd denied me. Before that night, my days had been quieter, simple in comparison, but rich in purpose. I lived alone in a modest apartment downtown, surrounded by the soft hum of the city. My morning started early, the scent of freshly brewed coffee filling the kitchen, a small ritual of comfort. Work was a relentless rhythm, balancing calls, meetings, and site visits for Royal Crest's growing collection of luxury hotels across the globe. Each property reflected a piece of my vision, elegance woven with warmth, a place where people felt both grandeur and belonging. My team was small but fiercely loyal. I never forgot the early days when I worked late into the night, staring at spreadsheets and blueprints, building what seemed impossible. My heart was stitched into every corner of those buildings. I didn't keep much from my family about the business. It wasn't just pride, it was protection. Every time I reached out, offering to bridge the gap, I was met with skepticism or outright dismissal. So I built walls instead of bridges. At home, the silence was comforting. No judgment, no comparisons, just me and the steady ticking of the clock on my wall. The contrast couldn't have been sharper with my family's world, the grand estate, the formal dinners, the weight of expectations and legacy. Arthur, our father, was a man of tradition, a titan of business who valued lineage and loyalty above all else. Isabella, his eldest, was his pride and shadow, sharp-minded, ambitious, and fiercely protective of their shared legacy. And me? I was the one who walked away, The one who chose a different path. The tension that night had been simmering long before I stood at the hotel entrance. I remember the subtle shifts in how Isabella treated me over the past few months. It wasn't the open hostility I expected, no. It was colder, more calculated. A clipped greeting here, a dismissal there. Like she was testing boundaries, making sure I remembered my place. Our father's birthday was always the biggest event of the year, held at the Royal Crest's flagship hotel. Invitations were reserved for the closest family and the most influential guests. I hadn't been invited, of course. That was Isabella's doing, or so I believed. The first clue that something was off came a week before the party. I called Dad, hoping to hear his voice, to maybe catch a glimpse of the man I once thought would stand up for me. "Charlotte, dear," he said, warm but distracted. "Isabella is handling the arrangements this year. She's very particular." His tone felt like a gentle brush-off, but I swallowed the sting. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe Isabella would be kind. Then came the invitation, or rather, the absence of one. I waited by the mailbox every day, hoping against reason. But nothing arrived. No card, no call, no mention. When I texted Isabella casually, trying to gauge her mood, her responses were brief and frosty. A week before the party, I showed up at the family estate unexpectedly, hoping to catch Dad alone. Isabella answered the door, all smiles that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Charlotte, what a surprise." Her voice was syrupy sweet, but I caught the underlying warning. "I just wanted to see Dad. It's been a while." "Well, Dad is busy preparing for his party," she said, blocking my path subtly. "You know how stressful these events can be." I nodded, masking my frustration. "I'd just like a moment with him." Isabella shook her head, the smile slipping. "I'm afraid that's not possible right now." That's when I first realized I was being shut out. Not just from the party, but from the family. The days leading up to the birthday were filled with quiet self-doubt and simmering anger. I questioned if I had done the right thing leaving the firm, the family expectations, the safe path. But every success story I built reminded me why I chose this life, the freedom, the creation, the proof that I could stand on my own. On the evening of the party, I arrived early, taking in the opulence of the Royal Crest's grand lobby. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across marble floors polished to perfection. The air was a blend of fresh orchids and expensive cologne. I paused, smoothing the front of my coat and steadying my breath. I felt the familiar tug of anxiety, the kind that comes when you know a storm is about to break. Isabella's blockade at the entrance was no surprise, but the sharpness of her words cut deeper than I expected. "Too poor and unsuccessful," she had said, as if those were the final nails in my coffin. I wanted to shout, to scream that I was more than what she thought. But instead, I did what I'd learned over years of fighting invisible battles. I held my ground. When the hotel staff recognized me and bowed in deference, my heart swelled not with pride, but with relief. Here, I was seen. That night's revelation was more than just a public unveiling. It was a reckoning. Isabella's face paled as she whispered harshly to my father, "You never told me she was." Dad's eyes searched mine, filled with a mixture of admiration and regret. The guests murmured, their whispers carrying tales of my success that none of them had imagined. The family's coldness thawed just enough for me to see the cracks in their armor, their long-held prejudices, and the price they had paid for them. In that moment, I realized something important. Respect is not given. It's earned, and sometimes, it must be claimed. After the stunned silence in the lobby, the room seemed to pulse with a different energy, one that shifted toward curiosity, then grudging respect. I felt eyes on me, some wide with disbelief, others with envy or shame. Isabella stood just a few feet away, her face a portrait of disbelief and fury, mixed with something I recognized. Fear. Fear of losing control, of losing the narrative she had long dominated. "Charlotte," Dad finally spoke, his voice steady but layered with complexity. "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at him, at the man whose approval I had chased my entire life, because I didn't think it mattered. I left, and you all thought I was a failure. I wasn't. I built something real, something you could never understand from the inside. He nodded slowly, swallowing years of silence. "I'm proud of you." It was the first time he'd said those words to me in decades. And though the words were soft, they carried a weight that filled the space between us. Isabella's lips pressed tightly together. Then she stepped forward, voice trembling but controlled. "You embarrassed us, Charlotte. You humiliated this family." I met her gaze evenly. "No, Isabella. I was invisible before tonight. I was the family's shame, the one to be ignored or looked down upon. I didn't humiliate anyone. I showed the truth." Her eyes narrowed, but she said no more. The guests were still whispering, the social atmosphere thick with tension. I could feel the undercurrents, some admiration, some resentment, and a whole lot of unspoken history. The party carried on, but for me, the night had changed. I was no longer just the daughter who walked away. I was the CEO who owned the very empire they celebrated. When I moved to the room, hotel staff greeted me with a respectful nod, opening doors, offering drinks. It was a small taste of the respect I'd earned quietly, far from this family's judgment. Later, in a kidder corner, Dad pulled me aside. "Charlotte," he said, voice low and sincere. "I wish we had known this side of you sooner. Maybe things would have been different." I gave him a small, bittersweet smile. "Maybe. But what matters now is that you see me." He nodded, eyes moist. "I do." In the days that followed, the fallout from that night rippled through the family and their social circles. Isabella avoided me, her coldness deeper than ever, but others reached out, their tone more cautious, their respect newly earned. I spent hours reflecting on the years lost, how easy it might have been if they'd only looked beneath the surface, if they'd recognized my worth beyond the shadows of their expectations. Yet, despite the hurt, I felt a strange peace. For the first time, I was standing fully in my truth, unapologetically. The betrayal didn't come as a sudden explosion. It was more like a slow, grinding crack that finally shattered everything. After the party, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. I was in the hotel's private lounge, waiting for a meeting, when I caught Isabella's voice, sharp, mocking, cruel. She never deserved to be part of this family, she sneered to one of Dad's old friends. Leaving the firm was a disgrace, but playing CEO, it's a joke. My heart tightened as I listened, the sting of years of condescension suddenly sharp and raw. She continued, oblivious to my presence. "Dad was too soft on her. She's nothing more than a spoiled dreamer who thinks money fixes everything." I stepped out, my presence silencing the room. "Isabella," I said quietly, but with steel in my voice. "Is that really how you see me?" Her eyes flickered, surprise quickly replaced by disdain. "I see the truth. You're an outsider, pretending to be something you're not." I took a breath, steadying myself. "I'm the same person you've always ignored. The only difference is I stopped hiding." She scoffed, turning away. The betrayal wasn't just her words. It was the depth of the contempt she held, the years of dismissal wrapped up in a single moment. That night, I sat alone in my penthouse suite, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the windows. The hum of traffic below was a distant murmur. But inside, my mind raced. How had it come to this? How had my own sister become the gatekeeper of my worth? I thought of Dad, his silence, his regret, of Isabella's anger and fear, and of myself, the girl who had dared to dream beyond the narrow walls of family expectations. I wasn't naive. I knew that money could never erase the pain or rewrite the past, but it could carve out a new future one where I was no longer invisible. The next morning, I called a meeting with my closest advisors. I was determined to respond with grace, but also strength. "We need to handle this carefully," I said. "This family drama isn't just personal, it's public now." One of my trusted executives nodded. "We can release a statement. Show the world the truth behind Royal Crest's founder. It'll reshape the narrative." I considered the weight of that decision. Public exposure meant scrutiny, gossip, and the potential for backlash. But it also meant reclaiming my story. "Do it," I said finally. "Let the world know who I am." Meanwhile, Isabella was stirring the family circle with whispers and half-truths, trying to control the damage. But the truth has a way of breaking free. The media caught wind of the revelation. Stories ran about the secret CEO, the daughter who walked away, but built an empire. Public opinion swung in my favor. People admired the underdog, the woman who defied her family's expectations. In boardrooms and social circles, my name was spoken with newfound respect. Yet, amidst the success, the personal wounds remained. One evening, Dad called. "Charlotte," he said, voice heavy with emotion. "I'm sorry for how things have been, for not standing up for you." I let the silence hang a moment before replying. "It's not too late, Dad, but things have to change." We agreed to meet, really meet, not just as father and daughter, but as two people trying to heal. The confrontation with Isabella lingered in my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. I knew that facing her again would require more than just words, it needed a reckoning. When the day came, I chose the hotel's elegant conference room for our meeting, a neutral ground that carried the weight of our shared history. Isabella arrived, composed but guarded. Her eyes flicked over me with the same mix of disdain and something else, resentment, perhaps regret. "Charlotte," she said coolly, "I suppose we have a lot to discuss." I nodded, voice steady. "We do. I want to understand, why did you push me away all these years?" She sighed, a rare crack in her armor. "I was protecting the family, Dad's legacy. You walked away when we needed you most." "And what about me?" I countered. Did you ever consider what I needed? To be seen? To be respected? She hesitated, then admitted softly. I was scared. Scared that you would prove us wrong. That you would succeed without us. That admission opened a door I hadn't expected. It wasn't love. Exactly, it was fear. Fear that my success would unravel the carefully constructed world they had built. The conversation wasn't easy. We revisited old wounds and unspoken hurts. I told her about the nights spent alone, building my hotels from the ground up, the sacrifices, the loneliness. She shared her burdens, the pressure to uphold the family name, the loneliness of always being the perfect daughter. For a moment, we were just two sisters. Flawed, hurting, human. I don't want us to be enemies, I said, but I need you to see me for who I am now. She nodded, tears glistening. I'm trying. That afternoon, I also met with Dad. We walked through the halls of the Royal Crest, the familiar grandeur softened by the new light between us. Charlotte, he said, I've been so focused on legacy. I forgot what really matters, family. I squeezed his hand. Legacy isn't just about buildings or money, Dad. It's about people. He smiled, the years of distance melting away. I'm proud of you. Truly. In the weeks that followed, I found myself slowly reintegrating into the family circle, not by their invitation, but on my terms. Isabella and I began to rebuild our relationship. Cautious but hopeful. The hotel chain continued to thrive, a testament to resilience and vision. But more importantly, I reclaimed my place not just as CEO of Royal Crest, but as a daughter, a sister, and a woman who refused to be defined by others' limitations. The revelation at the party rippled far beyond our family's walls. Word spread quickly through our social circles and the media, turning the once dismissed Charlotte into a figure of quiet admiration and some envy. I watched as Isabella's carefully curated world began to tremble. Invitations she once handed out freely became fewer. Old friends who once smiled in her direction shifted their eyes to me, their whispers carrying a new respect. The social consequence was undeniable. Isabella had tried to control the narrative, but I had flipped the script. I wasn't seeking revenge. I didn't want to destroy my family. I wanted acknowledgement, respect, and the dignity to live my truth openly. At the next family gathering, the atmosphere was palpably different. The cold shoulders had thawed slightly. There was an unspoken recognition that I was no longer the sister to be ignored. Dad greeted me with a warmth I hadn't seen in years, and even Isabella's glances softened, though pride still held tight in her heart. Our conversations no longer carried the sharp edge of old grievances. Instead, there was cautious hope like fragile new shoots pushing through winter's frost. Outside the family, my public persona as the founder of Royal Crest was embraced. I was invited to speak at industry events, asked for interviews, and even featured in a prominent business magazine. All the moments of solitude, sacrifice, and doubt found their reward in this newfound platform. Yet, despite the acclaim, the real victory was personal. The healing of relationships once thought broken beyond repair. One afternoon, I received a letter from Isabella handwritten, a rarity in this digital age. It was simple, honest, and filled with apologies for the years of misunderstanding and hurt. Her words spoke of a desire to start fresh, to rebuild the sisterhood that had frayed but never truly broken. I read the letter twice, feeling a warmth bloom in my chest, a mixture of forgiveness and hope. Healing didn't mean forgetting. He meant accepting the past, learning from it, and moving forward with grace. For me, that grace was found not in proving my worth to others, but in embracing my own strength. I was no longer the poor, unsuccessful sister. I was a woman who had faced rejection and turned it into an empire, and in doing so, I had finally claimed the respect that was always mine. The months that followed felt like a gentle unfolding of a new chapter, one where I could breathe without the weight of doubt or the sting of rejection. I spent more time with Dad, savoring moments that once felt impossible. We talked not just about business, but about life, regrets, and hopes. Isabella and I, too, found a tentative rhythm. We shared coffee and quiet mornings, exchanged small apologies, and began to see each other beyond the roles we had been cast into. It wasn't a perfect healing, no relationship ever is, but it was real. I learned something profound in those quiet moments. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about releasing its hold. I forgave Isabella for her coldness, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to free myself. I forgave Dad for his silence, understanding that love sometimes hides behind flawed expressions. And most importantly, I forgave myself for doubting my worth, for carrying the weight of their judgments longer than I should have. Building my hotels had been about more than wealth or status. It was a journey to claim my voice, my vision, and my place in the world. Standing in the grand lobby of the Royal Crest now felt different. It was no longer a symbol of exclusion, but one of accomplishment and belonging. As I reflected on my journey, I realized that respect is not a gift freely given. It is earned, often in quiet, unseen battles. And sometimes, it must be claimed boldly. To anyone feeling overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed, remember this. Your worth is not defined by others' opinions. Your dreams are valid, and your story is waiting to be told. Thank you for listening to my story. It's not just about a family or a hotel, it's about the quiet battles we all face to be seen, to be respected, and to stand in our truth. Sometimes, those closest to us are the hardest to convince. Sometimes, we must become our own champions. I wonder, have you ever been underestimated or shut out by someone you love? How did you find the strength to keep going? If this story spoke to you, please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories that explore the complexity of family, betrayal, and resilience, don't forget to subscribe and support. Remember, your story matters, and your voice deserves to be heard.